The letter. I never sent it begins with rain and the small, stubborn ritual of pretending I am fine. I say stubborn because it's the kind of pretending that digs its heels into wet ground, refusing to move even as the street turns into a river, and the river rises past the ankle of every lie I've ever told myself. Outside my window, the city is blurred by a merciful curtain. Inside, the little green light on my kettle clicks off, and I forget I made tea. Again. The cup cools beside the letter I never posted. Edges bent, a faint brown crescent where coffee. Kissed it weeks ago like a bruise that never quite faded. I told myself I wrote it for you, but tonight I confess, to the window, to the rain, to the tired plant on my sill, that I wrote it for the ghost of who I was when you were here. Dear you, it begins, because your name still has teeth. I learned to stop touching the syllables. They bit me every time. I used to imagine that if I did send it, a quiet postal worker would carry my heart, fold it into white paper across an indifferent city, slide it into a metal mouth that would swallow it without ceremony. Somewhere else, another unseen hand would deliver it to your door. You would not be home. The letter would wait, exactly the way I did, through mornings and meals and chores, through a whole soft calendar of days. Perhaps a neighbor's cat would sleep against it. Perhaps sunlight would find it and bless it with warmth. Perhaps when you finally returned and turned the key and noticed the small white rectangle lying like a surrendered bird, you would lift it and feel its weight and know, before you even slid it open, that it had traveled far through a different kind of weather. The weather inside a person who can't forget. But I never sent it. I never even sealed it. Instead, I kept it close, a private relic from the church of almost. On nights like this, I read it. Not all at once. Just a line here, a confession there, the way you taste soup and decide whether it needs more salt. It always needs more truth. And then I put it down and pretend I'm fine again. I wash a dish, I fold a shirt, I rearrange the bookshelf, I do all the small useful things that mean nothing and everything at once. Tonight, I almost believe that I lie until the power flickers, the room exhales, and the dim returns like a kindness. The city pulls back into itself. Even the kettle seems to lower its voice. I feel the old current ride up my spine, the one that says, say it out loud or it will rot inside you. You once told me that grief is just love with nowhere to go. I remember, I laughed and said, so it takes a bus? You rolled your eyes and kissed my forehead and said, maybe. Maybe it rides around all night, looking for an address it can't find. I said, it should call first. You said, it did. You didn't answer. I answer now. I answer in the only language I have left, the night and the page. The letter rustles when I touch it, paper birds always want to fly, and I read the first paragraph again. I had written, I have learned the geography of your absence, the streets I don't take, the cafe I avoid at noon because that's where you said the soup was always honest, the aisle in the market where the brand of tea you loved sits like a dare, cheap and loyal, the song the barista plays at closing, a careless knife, the bench that learned our names, the sky you introduced me to, teaching me the word cirrus like it was a secret. I never understood clouds were sentences until you taught me to read their grammar. I pause. I hold my breath, listening for the old ache. It arrives like thunder rolling down a distant street. Nothing breaks, but everything shakes. Maybe if you were here, you'd say the night is not trying to hurt me. It just doesn't know where else to put all its blue. I make tea again, this time remembering to pour it. The steam climbs to meet my face, and I close my eyes and let it ghost my skin. I don't cry. I don't do that as easily as I used to. The body learns the contour of sorrow and becomes a basin that no longer overflows. It holds what it holds. It makes no theater of it. I think of your last day in this apartment, the suitcase by the door, the way your hands looked smaller when you folded your sweater and then decided to leave it. It will smell like you, I said, meaning, it will smell like us. It already does, you answered, meaning, it always will. We were careful with each other that day, like two people lifting a framed photograph from a wall they were about to repaint. You pressed your forehead to mine, and I wished that touch had a calendar. I wished it could book a longer stay. When the door clicked, a part of me clung to the idea that a click can be undone. that doors are mouths that can speak a different sentence. I sat on the floor among your almosts. The sweater did smell like you, but very quietly, like the last stanza of a poem. In the weeks after, I became a disciple of routine. I woke at the same hour. I washed dishes with the same soap. I ate the same breakfast, as if grief were a lock and repetition its key. In the afternoons, I walked the long way home past 3 particular trees that in your taxonomy of wonder were called London planes. Patchwork bark, you said, as if the tree changed outfits every season, but never cleaned up after itself. You made the city into something I could love without having to earn it. The first time I took that route without you, the trees were shedding pieces of themselves the way some people shed promises. The sidewalks were delicate with lace. I wanted to sweep them. I wanted to tape the pieces back on, to say to the trees, "Here, be whole." Later, I realized that losing parts of yourself is also how you breathe. I learned that from you, too. Not from what you said, but from how you left. There is a temptation to make a villain of absence, to dress it in black and give it knives and let it stalk around the room stealing everything you forgot to anchor. But absence is not cruel. It is simply thorough. It takes the morning coffee, and the shared grocery list, and the warm dent on the left side of the couch, and the trivial sentence at 11:14 p. Buddy, did you see the moon? And it leaves you with a house that is still a house, and a self that is still a self, and a list of reasons to continue that is surprisingly long for someone who cannot remember the last time they laughed without flinching. On the 7th Thursday after you left, yes, I was counting. Counting is one of sorrow's quiet hobbies. I found your note wedged between 2 cookbooks. If anyone can learn a new year, it's you. You had a talent for future tense blessings. I liked to pretend they were recipes only I could follow. That afternoon, I made your favorite soup, the honest one, and burned it a little. It tasted like a promise that would not stop trying to be kept. I do not want to make this letter a museum. It is not a place to stare at the past until it blurs. It is a door. So I turn the page. I write a date. I consider the weather because you always did. Rain again, I add, as if the sky were a faithful dog returning a stick I never threw. I list the facts. I am alive. I am eating. I am sleeping better than last month, but worse than last year. I am learning how to keep a plant alive, barely. I am reading the book you said would forgive me. I am occasionally surprised by joy the way one is surprised by a good busker, standing completely still and then suddenly music. There is a story you love to tell about your grandmother, who kept a jar of smooth stones on her kitchen counter. Every time someone said something unkind about themselves, she would drop a stone in a glass bowl with a dramatic clink and say, "That is the sound of your heart being heavy. Do you want to carry a bucket all day?" It made everyone laugh, and then it made everyone careful. I never met her, but on lonely mornings I imagine her hovering over my shoulder, stone at the ready. Clink when I call myself a fool. Clink when I tell the mirror I am unlovable. Clink when I imagine I am difficult to stay for. After the 3rd clink, I stop. I pour the stones back into the jar. I make toast. The day resumes its modest courage. I wish I could tell you that healing is a road with signs. It is not. It is a field with fog and the occasional fox that watches you as if deciding whether you belong. Most days, I do not. But sometimes when the light is kind and the air remembers how to be gentle, I understand that belonging is not a reward. It is simply a way to breathe. I do not know where you went after you left the threshold of us. I know the city didn't swallow you because it burps up rumors sometimes and your name is not among them. I tell myself you are somewhere with a clean window and a plant that does not grudgingly survive you. I tell myself there is a library card in your pocket and a list of albums you are excited to fall in love with, and a friend who knows when you need silence and when you need soup. I tell myself you still watch the sky the way you used to, with that startled reverence like you had just been forgiven. It is easier to love the future when I put you in it. It is dangerous too, but tonight I am allowed a small danger. I am, after all, writing to someone who may never read this. There is a freedom in letters unmailed. They answer only to the truth. I want to tell you about the man on the bus yesterday who hummed along to a song only he could hear. He had the face of someone who has learned that most of life is not urgent, and he made the air around him soft. When the bus lurched and a woman stumbled, he reached out without drama, as if it were as ordinary as breathing. She steadied. She said thank you like a prayer. He nodded like a priest. I carried that moment in my pocket all day and took it out when the afternoon became too heavy. It helped. You would have liked him. You always did know how to introduce me to the music people made without instruments. I want to tell you about the little girl in the bookstore who chose a book by the sound it made when she turned its pages. She was testing for friendship, I think. Some pages are too stiff. Some are too eager. She listened for the ones that made the sound of a friend who will keep your secrets. When she found it, she smiled with her whole body. It looked like a promise the world finally kept. I want to tell you these things because once we kept a jar of beautifuls, a literal jar, glass and generous, on the table, and every time we noticed something tender, we'd write it down and feed the jar like a shared pet. You said it was important to prove to ourselves that the world did not end when we closed our eyes. When you left, I opened the jar and read all our beautifuls in one sitting. It was like drinking a lake. I coughed, I cried. Then I put the jar away. Last week, I brought it back. I wrote one small beautiful and folded it small. The bus paused for a cat. That was all. It was enough. Today, I added a child measured books by their whispers. This is how I practice staying. I wonder what you are collecting. I wonder what jar sits on your table now. I wonder if it's labeled beautifuls or if you found a better word. You unfailingly did. You once called the first shard of sunlight in the morning tomorrow's handwriting. It made no sense and perfect sense at once. I can hear you in the kitchen of memory, opening cupboards, looking for the right mug. Not that one, you'd say, laughing. It tastes like dust. As if mugs had flavors. As if everything did. I turn the letter over. There is still space. I write the truth I have practiced in secret. I loved you in the way a small town loves its only train. Fiercely, foolishly, listening for it long after it has passed. And then, beneath it, another truth. I am learning to love the quiet tracks too. The page feels warmer after I write that, as if paper understands a person's winter. The rain, meanwhile, has decided to be serious. It drums on the roof in a language I once believed was threatening. Now I know it is merely thorough. Water always was. It tests every seam. It finds every ambition of escape. It does not mean to ruin. It means to arrive. I leave the window and light the small candle you gave me last spring, the one in the tin printed with faded constellations. It smells faintly of cedar and something else I never could place. You said it was marketed as forest after rain and rolled your eyes at the arrogance of selling weather. I liked lighting it on nights when outside was too much. Tonight I light it because I am trying to remind myself that the world is both big and containable. That I can hold a small part of it without claiming any of it. The flame trembles. A draft slips under the door and turns the candle into a breathing animal. I watch until my eyes learn its rhythm. Then I speak into the room, a little reckless, a little brave. I forgive us. It is not a sentence I planned. It arrived like some wild bird hopping through the open window of my mouth. For a moment, I am stunned into stillness. Then I say it again, quietly, as if telling a skittish friend the party is over and they can finally take off their shoes. I forgive us. Not because we were wrong, but because we were human, and humanness requires mercy the way lungs require air. I do not know if you would accept this mercy. I do not know if you think we need it. I only know that I do. I know that some nights I hold my own hand under the table like a child in trouble, and the child I am does not let go. My phone buzzes. For one foolish beat, my heart startles like a deer. This is what the body does when it confuses electricity with news. The text is from Mina, who has loved me through 3 broken umbrellas and one very specific kind of quiet. You okay? It says the question a small bridge across a dark. I write back, rain, tea, letter, breathing. She replies with a blue heart and a photograph of her cat, whose face always looks like it's just solved a crime. I smile without wincing. Progress. If this were a story, if you and I were characters and the night a plot device, I would tell you that the power goes out and, in the sudden velvet, I ache in a cinematic way and then discover a bravery I didn't know I owned. But this isn't fiction, at least not that kind, and the power stays on, a small, steady domestic miracle. My bravery is less dramatic. It is the bravery of staying in the room with my letter and not turning on the television to drown it out. It is the bravery of telling the truth and letting that truth be less than perfect. I think of the last time we spoke. Not the soft murmurs of leaving day, but truly spoke. It was at the table with the jar. You said, "Some loves are meant to teach us how to hold a door." I said, "So we can let each other go?" You said, "So we can let ourselves through." We laughed without humor, a careful choreography. We were trying so hard to be kind that we forgot to be feral. Maybe that was our mistake. Or maybe it was our grace. I press my palm flat on the letter to smooth its stubborn curl. The skin on my hand is mapped with small ordinary histories. A faint line from the time I dropped the mug. The pale crescent where a ring used to insist. I have become fond of these maps. They prove I survived not perfectly, but honestly. The kettle clicks again. I pour the rest of the water over the same tea bag because waste, like regret, has begun to offend me. I carry the cup to the window and open it just a little to let the night brush my face. Somewhere, a car makes the particular sound of leaving. Somewhere, a siren threads itself through the rain like a red stitch. Somewhere, another person stands at another window wondering what to do with the word forever now that it has stopped pretending. What do I do with this letter? I ask the room. The room obligingly says nothing. I could burn it. Ceremonies help? I could let the flame eat our nouns and adjectives until what remains is the shape of a goodbye that does not punish. I imagine the ash settling on my fingers like a new kind of dust, and I imagine washing it off. And I imagine the precise second the paper becomes smoke and the words become air. And I am not certain whether that would feel like relief or theft. I could send it. I could walk it to the metal mouth and surrender it to the unknown machinery of endpoints. But the truth is, I do not want this letter to end. I want it to remain what it has been, a place I can go when the rain forgets how to be quiet. A place that knows me, unremarkably and entirely. Perhaps I will do what you used to do with difficult things. I will fold it into a smaller shape. You were always turning paper into animals. Cranes mostly, though once you made a fox that convinced me it might get up and leave. When the world is too big, you said, make it into something that fits in your palm. I pick up the letter. I fold the top corner down, then in again, then the other, until the paper remembers how to become wing. I hold the crane between finger and thumb. Its shadow on the table looks like a map of some country that doesn't exist, the kind a child would invent. I do not know what to do with it, so I place it on the windowsill, beside the plant that forgives me and the candle that tries. The crane faces the rain. It does not flinch. Stay, I tell it and mean me. The streetlight across from my building flickers. The rain quiets into a smaller vowel. I think of the first morning after you left, when the world had the indecent audacity to be beautiful. The sky was clean. The clouds had manners. A woman in a yellow coat crossed the street without looking and did not get punished for her faith. A boy on a bicycle sang in a falsetto that was braver than I felt. I stood on the stoop and the city did not know me, and I thought, if I can survive this day, perhaps I can survive the next. I have survived a ledger of days since then. Some were kind. Some tried to kill me and failed by an inch. I have learned that inches matter. I have learned that we are all heroes of almost. On my table, the jar of beautifuls waits with the patience of glass. I take a scrap of paper and write, "A paper bird did not fly away." I fold it into the jar and listen for the soft agreement of it landing against the others. There is comfort in that sound, the sound of small things choosing to keep each other company. The candle is nearly done. The flame is a small coin now, spending itself steadily. Before it goes, I take a breath and do the bravest thing I can think of. I write your name, it hurts, and then it hurts less. I write it again, slower, as if teaching a child to read. The letters stop being teeth. They become tools. I am building a bridge I may never cross, but the building feels like prayer. Good night, I tell the name. Good night, I tell the rain. Good night, I tell the version of me who thought love meant never letting go. I open my hand and see that it is empty and warm. Both qualities feel like mercy. When I turn out the light, the room does not become cruel. It becomes honest. In the dark, I can hear the city sleeping in irregular rhythms, the way people do when they are almost safe. I lie down and the bed accepts me without comment. The crane is a pale shape by the window. The plant, I swear, leans closer to the night. I do not dream of you. This is new. I dream of a bus that stops for a cat, and when the cat crosses, it turns and looks at me as if to say, "Look how the world can wait." I wake in the gentle middle of morning, the rain changed to a polite drizzle. The letter is still a bird. My hand is still a map. The day is still an invitation. and for the first time in a long time, I accept. The morning carries itself with the quiet pride of a rescue dog, timid, hopeful, unwilling to believe it has finally been invited inside. I move through it slowly. The air smells like whetstone and new paper. When I open the window wider, the city exhales steam. Somewhere, a bakery uncurls its first warm syllables into the street, and a jogger negotiates with their lungs. I make toast like a person auditioning for a life that can be ordinary again, and the toast participates, browning politely. It is astonishing how much courage the day will lend you if you ask for only the small coins. The crane on the sill has learned its job, to stay and remind. Its paper is already softening at the beak, thirsting for a future it will not be given, and I find the tenderness in that humbling. Yesterday, I was a person who built a bird to hold a letter. Today, I am a person who feeds a bird with light. I tell myself this is progress measured in the quietest metrics. Not better, not worse. Just true. At noon, Mina texts again with an offer disguised as a question. Coffee? And I type yes before doubt has time to sharpen. She chooses the small cafe on Verity Street where the tables wobble, and the owner has a habit of giving you an extra sugar packet like a secret. It is 2 blocks past the soup place. The route feels deliberate in a way that might hurt. I go anyway because if there is a god of almosts, I suspect they bless the people who show up. On Verity, the puddles have become mirrors with amnesia. They reflect whatever asks nicely. I step around them and arrive damp but intact. The bell above the cafe door makes the soft sound of an apology. Mina is already there with a book face down and a halo of frizz that the weather loves to cultivate. She looks up and I am reminded again that friendship is a kind of home you can carry in a pocket. You look like you slept, she says. I did, I answer, surprised to find the statement true. Miracles come in mugs, she says, pushing one toward me. The foam wears a leaf I am too fond of destroying. I touch it with my spoon until the leaf becomes a river, then a cloud, then nothing identifiable at all. We talk around the edges first. The neighbor's unfortunate trumpet practice. An article about bees, the rumor that the bookstore cat is learning to open doors. Mina is expert at this choreography. How to let the conversation be a path that winds past the necessary fields without trampling them, until you wake and realize you have been among wildflowers the whole time. When we reach the clearing, she does not lean in as if preparing to rescue me from myself. She simply tilts her head, an invitation for honesty to sit down and stay a while. I folded the letter, I say, into a bird. She smiles like the sun made a private joke. Of course you did. I thought about burning it. The confession tastes like an aspirin I haven't swallowed yet. Fire is a beautiful liar, Mina says. It gives you the illusion of an ending. Sometimes illusions help. Sometimes they sell you the same ache in a prettier dress. I want a dress that fits, I say. You are sewing one, she says. Crooked stitches count. When she leaves, she slips a small book into my bag as if the bag had requested a companion. I do not notice until I am home and unpacking the day. The book is secondhand, its spine a weary soldier. Inside the cover she has written, "For when the rain is talkative." The book is a collection of letters written by people to no one in particular. The ocean, a summer, the version of themselves who still believed, and I find comfort in that chaos. In the proof that language can make a raft out of nearly anything. Afternoon is a gentle animal. I feed it chores. I change the bed sheets and the bed thanks me with the scent of something that might be a new start. I wash the mug that tasted like dust just to convince it to reconsider. I sweep the hallway, an act which feels like participating in the civility of existence. I answer an email from a distant cousin who sends pictures of children who have learned to make ridiculous faces on command. They are relentless, she writes, and I want to tell her that relentless joy is a kind of religion I could pray to without argument. At 4, the sky decides to remember blue. It peels back its gray coat and shrugs into something almost celebratory. I put on shoes without holes and go to the park because the world has extended a hand, and I am practicing yes. The grass is pocked with yesterday's decisions. Dogs, sudden with purpose, reinvent fetch as if it were a brand new invention. A couple argues kindly about something with the intensity of harvest. Their hands keep finding each other in the pauses, as if re-choosing can be a verb you practice mid-sentence. I sit on a bench that does not know my name and watch a boy attempt to fly a kite in wind that refuses to commit. The kite droops. It accuses the air. The boy tries again. The kite thinks about it and then declines. After the fourth attempt, a person I initially catalog as a stranger enters the scene and, with a few adjustments to the tail and the way the string is held, some minor physics, whispered with confidence, the kite suddenly understands its job and offers itself to the sky. It is only when the boy turns to say thank you that I recognize the stranger. It is you. Recognition is not a bolt. It is a slow-lit match. The features assemble themselves from memory's grocery list. The slant of a smile that preferred to begin in one corner, the way your posture kept secrets from your shoulders. My heart, that amateur actor, misses its cue and then overcompensates with an enthusiastic entrance. I become aware of my hands in the way one becomes aware of hands when holding something that might break. Around me, the park has the audacity to continue. A bird insists on being ordinary. My breath negotiates with the air like two people agreeing to disagree. You do not scan the benches for ghosts. You do not expect me in this version of the afternoon. It takes you longer to see me than it took me to collect you from the puzzle of before. When your gaze does trip over me, there is a beat of stillness. The kite, unsupervised, bows toward the grass but changes its mind. The boy gasps. You nod at the sky the way you used to nod at any creature doing its best. We do not wave. We do not run. We are not that story. Instead, the distance elects itself to stay, a small frontier with intact treaties. You lift your hand enough to draw a line in the air between acknowledgement and approach. I mirror you because mirroring is a language we learn together. Then you return to the boy and say something that makes him stand taller inside his shoes, and I remember how kind can be a craft and you were always a careful artisan. For the rest of the hour, I practice the discipline of remaining seated. My body wants to audition for impossible outcomes. I let it rehearse in silence, then I let the auditions end. When you and the boy finally walk toward the exit, a slow river with a small current, you pass close enough that the particular scent of your laundry finds me. It smells like the old apartment's afternoon. You do not look again. I do not either. This feels like a kind of mercy we could not have offered each other before. When I get home, the crane looks the same, which is to say it looks like a folded decision. I tell it about the park because talking to paper is less absurd than talking to absence, and the crane, for all its fragility, is present. The telling empties some pressure from the room. I add to the jar of beautifuls. The wind remembered. I add another, smaller. We did not break. That night, I do not sleep quickly. The ceiling and I have a conversation about patience. I allow myself 3 memories. The way you once counted the seconds between lightning and thunder as if measuring the distance to forgiveness. The time you returned from the market triumphant because the oranges looked like small suns. And the morning we tried to learn a dance from a video and ended up laughing so hard the neighbors applauded through the wall. When the 4th memory knocks, I decline. It leaves politely. Morning arrives with practical hands. I go to work because I have a job that wants me, and I have learned that wanting is a compliment we should not ignore. The office has its old comedy. Printers requiring bargains, meetings that could have been kinder to email. At lunch, a colleague tells a story about their grandmother's secret to soup, never apologize to it, and we laugh, and I think how useful grandmothers are to the architecture of a day. I answer questions competently. I make a spreadsheet behave. I am a citizen of function, and it steadies me. In the late afternoon, a storm bruises the sky again, and the office windows become documentaries about water. I feel the urge to check the park, as if the kite were a plotline I am responsible for monitoring. Instead, I go home the long way, past the soup shop I avoided for a season of self-preservation. I pause in the doorway and inhale the smell of honest broth and all its small promises. Inside, nothing has changed. The chalkboard lists the soups in handwriting that believes in itself. The server smiles at me as if apology were not necessary here. I order the one you loved, not because I want to haunt myself, but because I have decided that love cannot own soup. At a table by the window, I eat slowly. Outside, umbrellas invent their careful choreography. I do not perform grief for them. I perform chewing. When I finish, the server brings me a small bowl on the house. Ginger tea, for the weather, they say. And I could weep at the civilization of that gesture, but I don't. My throat thanks the ginger with a warmth that feels like a good rumor. On the walk home, the rain concentrates into a border. I step over it. In the hallway of my building, someone has left a plant with a note, "Free if you can love it," and I laugh out loud because the universe is unsubtle when it wants to be. It is a pathos, generous with forgiveness, the sort of green that makes rooms remember how to breathe. I carry it inside like a guest of honor and place it beside the original plant. who, I realize, has been waiting for company longer than is polite to ask. They adjust to each other with the dignity of strangers at a bus stop. I tell them both not to judge me by previous mistakes. The crane nods in solidarity. The next days lean into a rhythm that is not quite a pattern. On Tuesday, I wake before the alarm because the dream has gently placed me back into my life without the thud. On Wednesday, I trip on the stairs, and an older man catches my elbow with the reflex of someone who has practiced rescue. He says, "Happens to the best of us," which is a lie we tell to keep each other standing. On Thursday, I see a woman cry quietly on the subway, and every person in the car pretends to be reading a very gripping paragraph in order to give her privacy, which is the kind of kindness that makes me proud of our species. On Friday, I take the long way home and pass a music store where a child is trying the violin for the first time, and the sound is a brave disaster, and her mother keeps nodding as if she is being sung to by a cathedral. I think of you less and then differently. The memories stop arranging themselves as weapons and become, instead, postcards from a country I lived in and left on purpose. Sometimes the country writes back. The stamp is a small cloud. On a Saturday that smells like expectation, Mina and I visit the flea market. It is a city of small attempts. The earnest wobble of handcrafted bowls, the stubborn romance of old photographs sold by the handful, clothes that want new bodies to learn. At a stall near the exit, a woman sells typewriter keys made into necklaces. The keys are from machines that used to muscle words into paper with a force that modern devices would find indecent. I pick up a key that is the letter L and feel the weight of it. The woman says, "That one's been pressed a lot," and we grin like accomplices. I buy L and O and V and E and wear them in a row that spells a word that can embarrass you if you let it. I do let it. I want to blush again without bleeding. At home, I hang the letters on a nail beside the door, where I will see them on the way out into the world and again on the way back. If I had a jar for braveries, I would drop this moment into it. The letters look like small windows into a house that once was on fire, and now, miraculously, is simply a place to sit down. On Sunday, the sky is the particular blue that makes people propose. It also makes them forgive. I take the jar of beautifuls from its corner and empty it onto the table. The slips of paper colonize the wood with their modest claims. The bus paused for a cat. A paper bird did not fly away. The wind remembered. We did not break. Ginger knew what to do. A stranger's hand made gravity kind. Someone believed their daughter was a cathedral. Reading them feels like listening to a choir that has rehearsed separately and is still somehow singing together. One slip catches under another and resists being found. When I free it, I see a sentence I did not write. Mina's handwriting, rebellious and loyal. You let the letter live. I place it at the top. I decide it counts for 2. The week that follows brings a call from a job I applied to months ago and forgot to want. They say words like fit and voice and we think, and I say words like gratitude and timeline and I can. And when the call ends, I sit very still and inventory my pulse. It is working with me instead of against me. This feels rarer than it should. I make tea to commemorate it. I do not spill. In the evening, I walk to the river because rivers are classrooms where I consistently pass. The water is serious about leaving and takes everything along in case of emergency. Along the path, runners volunteer their breath to the cause of being alive. A woman in a red coat releases a small boat made from a leaf into a puddle and laughs when the wind insists on captaincy. Near the railing, a man plays the trumpet in a key the air appreciates. Children attempt a dance that ignores the coordination demanded by physics. A dog sits like a philosopher. I slip between these ordinary miracles like a person practicing translation. A few steps ahead, I see you again. This time you are alone, your hands in your pockets, your attention married to the sky. The air between us consults itself. I have the impulse to duck behind a tree and audition for invisibility, but the impulse passes before I audition. We have already survived being the kind of people who can share oxygen without rehearsing a war. When you notice me, your face travels through a small weather before arriving at something like clear. We both stop, because momentum is sometimes a cruelty and sometimes a bridge, and today there is no river to cross. We are simply 2 people on a path where the rules are mostly about not colliding. You lift your hand. I lift mine. We close a little of the distance because civility deserves feet. Hey, you say. And your voice has the familiar grain of a well-loved table. Hey, I answer. And my voice does not betray me to grief. There is a moment that would tempt a less practiced version of myself into cataloging what you are wearing, what you are not, whether the laugh lines are new or remembered. I do not audit you. I offer a small truth instead. I saw you with the kite, I say. A smile arrives, cautious but real. He did all the work, you say. I just moved the tail. You always were a good editor, I say, and we both wince at the past tense like stepping on a nail we knew was on the floor and left there anyway. We stand in that wince until it exhausts itself. Then you nod toward the river, toward the constant leaving that somehow keeps arriving. How are you? There are so many answers, I curate. Less theatrical, I say. More honest. Good, you say, and I believe you mean it. We could say more. We could excavate or embroider. Instead, we do something neither of us was good at before. We stop while the kindness is still fresh. Take care, I say. You too, you say. We pass each other like two pages turning in different directions, and I do not look back. I think you don't either. It is not a triumph. It is a practice. At home, the crane looks slightly ridiculous wearing a necklace of late light. I tell it about the river and how the trumpet made the air remember it had lungs. I write another beautiful, we used our small words well. I add the river knows how to leave without cruelty. I almost add, you looked okay, but decide that some observations belong to the archive that is not for jars. That night, I dream not of buses or cats, but of a kitchen filled with people I love, many of whom have not met, all of whom know instinctively where to stand so everyone can reach the salt. In the dream, you arrive late, bringing the dessert we always fought over ordering, and nobody startles. We simply make room for your elbows. The dream is not sentimental. It is practical. I wake with the kind of ache that feels like exercise instead of injury. Days collect. The season turns with the resignation of a reliable actor asked to play the same role with slightly different lines. I buy a new coat that does not apologize for its color. I learn to make a soup that forgives medium mistakes. I start the new job, where people say my name like they mean to keep it. And on the second week, a colleague tells me a story about the time they forgot how to speak in a meeting, and everyone waited. Simply waited until the words remembered the door. I add it to the jar. A room made patience a chair. One evening, the building's power does flicker and then surrender. The hallway converts to a throat cleared by darkness. Neighbors spill into the corridor wearing their best candlelight faces. Someone says, I have a deck of cards. Someone else says, I have a piano app that works without the internet. Children, unleashed from screens, make a game out of shadows. We gather in the stairwell, which has decided to host us, and for an hour, we are a small version of a city that believes in the usefulness of together. A woman I've only nodded to for months brings out a tray of cut oranges, and the stairwell smells like a bright rescue. We play a game where you have to lie convincingly and then tell the truth convincingly, and I realize the difference is sometimes a matter of tone. When the lights come back, no one rushes to abandon the moment. We hesitate, then carry our candles back inside as if escorting honored guests. Before bed, I write to the crane without paper. We were lanterns. I write to the letter folded inside the bird. You taught me to speak aloud without audience. I write to the version of me who began this with a bruise-shaped coffee stain. Look at your hands, they're still maps, but they lead to places you don't fear to visit. I am not healed. I am not broken. I am a person who has learned to greet the day like a neighbor, and the night like a friend with boundaries. I keep the window open a little wider now. Some mornings the city brings me a rumor of lilacs. Some nights the rain turns my building into an instrument, and I do not mind the song. On the first really cold afternoon, I pass the park and see the boy again, kiteless but confident, teaching someone smaller how to ride a bicycle. He runs beside the child with a hand hovering over the seat, not touching, ready, the kind of attention that makes falling safe. When the child wobbles and then steadies, the boy laughs, the laugh of someone surprised by their own competence. I want to send this moment to you like a postcard without destination. Instead, I send it to the jar and to the part of me that no longer requires your witnessing to validate my joy. Back home, the crane has gathered dust at the edge of one wing, a little gray crescent that looks like history. I do not blow it away. I let it stay as proof that even the things we keep perfect will learn to live in the air we actually have. I make tea. I sit by the window. I unfold a piece of blank paper and write. Not to you, not exactly, but to the night that keeps showing up even when I have been unkind to it. Dear whatever remains, thank you for staying while I learned the names of my weather. Thank you for letting my small courage count. Thank you for teaching me that a letter can be a room, and a room can be a life, and a life can be more than one goodbye. I sign no name. I seal no envelope. I place the paper under the crane's wing. The city continues its ordinary miracles. The kettle learns when to stop. The plants practice photosynthesis without bragging. Somewhere, the trumpeter chooses a different song and the river applauds with its whole body. When I finally turn off the light, the room is honest again. I lie down and do not negotiate with sleep. It arrives without argument, a guest who knows the code and enters quietly, leaving the door unlocked for morning. I begin to understand that endings don't always slam. Some of them close like a well-taught door, softly, with the decency of felt. The cold leans in, tidy and unapologetic. On evenings when the sky feels ironed flat, I walk the long block behind the library where the lamplight is patient and the pavement remembers leaves that have already let go. I don't look for you. Looking is a kind of bargaining. Instead, I practice inventory. 10 steady breaths, a window with a plant that refuses drama, a child's scarf forgotten on a railing and retrieved by a rushing parent who kisses the fabric as if lips could apologize to wool. These are enough to keep the night from becoming a corridor with no handles. At the market, I buy clementines because they understand how to be generous in small circles. I put 3 on my counter and write their names on sticky notes the way teachers label the world for beginners. Bright. Mercy. Pause. When I peel one, the room learns a better orange. I save a curl of rind and set it near the candle like punctuation. Mina invites me to a reading at the tiny bookstore where chairs apologize for being chairs and strangers give each other elbows of space. The author says into the mic, "Closure is what we call it when the story stops needing witnesses." The sentence lands in me like a coin dropping into a deep well, and, for once, I don't wait to hear whether it hits water. I just believe the distance exists. After, we stand in the aisle with our coats half on, as if indecision were part of fashion. Mina touches the necklace that spells my public courage. "You look different," she says. "How?" "Like a person whose ghosts learned to sit on the porch." "Do they ever come in?" I ask. "Sometimes," she says, grin small and bright. "But they wipe their feet now." On a day the weather refuses to categorize, the building posts a notice, "Roof access. Temporarily allowed for community stargazing. Saturday, 8 p.m. Someone has decided that permission is a door we can hold for each other. I go, carrying a thermos and an old blanket that understands loyalty. Neighbors I know by elevator silence become constellations of story. The woman who teaches math and makes her own jam. The man who fixes bicycles and grief in equal measures. The family whose toddler can point at Orion with the seriousness of a priest. We gather under a sky that is trying to be clear, and for a while the city lowers its volume. A person sets up a telescope on a tripod that looks like a question with 3 legs. We take turns peering into the small circle of elsewhere and gasping like polite sea creatures. When it's my turn, I see a smear of light that someone names a cluster. It looks exactly like something both near and unreachable. I whisper, "Thank you to no one in particular." On my way back to the blanket, I feel it before I see you, the particular quiet that folds around shared history the way fog folds around a tree. You stand at a reasonable distance, hands tucked, attention lifted. We have become experts at distance. I consider not crossing it. I consider crossing it incorrectly. Instead, I carry my thermos like a passport and choose the third thing. I cross it in a way that honors both our countries. "Hot chocolate?" I offer, because winter has taught me to speak in beverages. You laugh once, softly. You always include the weather in your sentences. "It keeps showing up," I say. We pour into paper cups that already know how to be held. The silence that arrives is not the old kind, the one that auditioned for tragedy. This one is domestic, like 2 rooms sharing a wall and agreeing not to eavesdrop. We look up. The stars decline performance, the clouds advance. I think of all the nights I begged the sky to be a metaphor, and it insisted on being a sky. "How's the job?" you ask. "New," I say. "Good. They let me make sentences that pay rent." You smile with your eyes the way you used to when you were proud without wanting credit for it. I knew they would. I saw the kite boy again, I add. He's become a bicycle coach. That's the job. you say. Move the tail, then let go. We don't tell the stories we cannot afford. We don't ask the questions that would invoice the heart. Instead, we stand among neighbors who have decided to be a tiny city and drink our warm sugar like believers. From somewhere behind us, a girl squeals. She has discovered the moon as if it were new. In a way, it is. It's wearing tonight's face. I walk home on the well-lit side of the roof. At my door, I pause. A small ceremony. Hand on knob, forehead bent to wood, the body's brief treaty with shelter. Inside, the crane waits where I left it, which is to say inside a decision. I lift it gently and find the paper under its wing. Dear whatever remains, the letter to a room that is learning to be a life. I add a line with a pencil that has been sharpened by effort. I met the weather and we agreed to use each other kindly. Days file themselves properly. I answer emails. I work. I forget, and then remember lunch. The plants practice their green, the pothos teaching the other by example that reaching for light is an art without shame. Sometimes I still hear the old siren inside me, the one that mistake catalogs softness as danger, and I sit very still until it drives past. If it returns, I name things out loud. Chair, cup, hand, breath, until the room reintroduces itself. A postcard arrives with a picture of a mountain that looks like someone's grandmother's knuckles. No return address? The handwriting is yours. It says only, the soup here is the opposite of honest, but it forgives me. I read it once and don't read it again. I don't put it in a drawer or on the fridge. I lean it on the jar of beautifuls like a visiting cousin. Welcome, not permanent. That night, I don't dream in riddles. I dream in doorways. The next morning, a small storm sets up camp on my windowsill. It is made of the kind of rain that doesn't ruin plans, only prolongs sentences. I decide to finish something that has followed me through rooms like a polite dog, the question of the letter's job. Not whether to burn it or mail it or fold it into an army of cranes. The job. What is a letter for, after all, if not to be a harness for truth? I unfold the bird. The paper remembers every crease with muscle memory and complaint. The letter stares up at me, a patient witness to my weather. I read from the beginning, not to punish myself, not to rewrite, but to honor the person who wrote it. Halfway through, a line arrests me. I am learning to love the quiet tracks, too. The sentence feels like a door I built blind that has somehow found its frame. I fetch an envelope, the good kind, an adult envelope. I address it to my own apartment. The act feels ridiculous and perfect, like wearing a crown in the kitchen. I press a stamp into the corner with a thumb that has learned sincerity. On the line for return address, I write the name I avoided for months. It does not bite. It lies down and lets the ink pet it. Outside, the rain puts on its best behavior as if escorting me. I carry the letter like an egg. At the blue box on the corner, I pause and listen to the city's ordinary opera. Brakes negotiating, shoes reasoning with sidewalks, a bus announcing its intention to exist. I slide the envelope into the slot, and when I let go, nothing dramatic happens. A small task is completed. Somewhere, a mechanism approves. Walking back, the relief is not a trumpet. It's the soft click a latch makes when close becomes closed. By the time I reach my door, I am humming to myself, a tune without a name, a voice that trusts the room. The crane, refolded, sits again on the sill. I tell it the news. We mailed the weather. It inclines its paper head as if to say, and the weather mailed you back. It does. 2 days later, the letter returns stamped and domesticated, delivered to the home it has always had. I open it at the table. The words are exactly what I remember, and not at all, because the person reading them is someone I have had the daily labor of becoming. I sign the bottom as if witnessing a contract. When I am done, I don't file it under sorrow. I give it the drawer where I keep the batteries and the spare light bulbs and the string that always becomes useful when you thought it wouldn't. A letter can be a tool. It can also be a light. Mina comes over with soup in a jar and opinions about nail polish. We sit on the floor like teenagers who trust carpeting more than furniture. I tell her about the mailbox. She raises her spoon in a toast. To self-addressed miracles, she says. To postage, I say, and we laugh until the soup forgives us. Winter practices sincerity for a while longer, then loses interest. The day the first reckless crocus puts its shoulder through the dirt, the city acts surprised, as if it hadn't seen this trick before. I walk to the park, and the bench remembers me, which is to say, I remember it without injury. I bring a book and read the same paragraph 3 times because the sun is passing notes across my face. A kite appears in the distance, not the boys, not your hands, just a shape arguing successfully with air. I don't audit it for symbolism. I let it be an arrangement of fabric and wind. At home, I open the windows top and bottom to teach the room how cross breezes work. I speak aloud because the day belongs to voices. You can come in, I tell the light, and it does, foolhardy and golden. The crane casts a crisp shadow, the kind of faithful outline artists use when they need proof of edges. I sharpen a pencil for no reason other than the comfort of a point. On a Sunday morning, I wake to birds trying out their vowels. I bake something with blueberries and forgiveness, and as the smell expands, I send a message to the building group thread. Loaf cooling in 3B. Slices for anyone who knocks with kindness. 3 neighbors do, each bringing something in trade. A jar of pickles that look like emerald commas, a book I didn't know I needed, a potted herb that answers to basil. We stand in my small kitchen with our elbows careful and laugh about nothing until the nothing becomes a feast. I add to the jar. We traded nouns and became plural. Then, the room did not notice it was small. Then, as the pencil grows blunt, a final slip for the day. I used to measure my life by what left. Today I measured it by what arrived. That evening the river invites me again. It wears a different coat, something silver that gives everything else permission to glow. As I approach, I see you sitting on the low wall near the path, not a coincidence, not a trap, just a fact. There is space beside you. There is space inside me. I choose the nearer. Hi, you say. Hi, I answer. We look at the water like people who understand repeatable miracles. After a while, you speak the way careful people do when they are not sure which direction the sentence will travel. I wanted to say, you stop. Start again? Thank you for the letter. For a heartbeat, the world stutters. Then I understand. You don't mean the one I mailed to myself. You mean the old one, the almost I never sent, the ghost I folded into a bird. My face must answer for my confusion, because you add quickly, not words on paper. I mean the way you walked through our ending, that letter. The one I got to read because you didn't throw fire at me. I breathe. The river approves? We were human, I say. We still are, you say, and something unclenches in the day. We don't apologize. We don't audit the past for refunds. Instead, we let the water do the arithmetic. When we stand, we share a brief, unremarkable hug, the kind that says the porch is open and the living room is not required. Then we choose different directions without ceremony. I don't count the steps before I turn. I don't turn. At home, I do nothing profound. I water the basil with ridiculous tenderness. I wash 2 mugs. I straighten a picture frame that prefers crooked. Before bed, I pick up a slip of paper and write without looking. The door closed like kindness. I drop it into the jar and listen to the choir accept another voice. The night is gentle, not because I earned it, but because nights are allowed to be gentle. I leave the window open. I do not perform loneliness for the furniture. Sleep arrives like an old friend who has finally learned to knock. In the morning, I wake with a sentence standing at the edge of my bed like a pet who wants breakfast. Some people stay even when they're gone. I stroke its head. Yes, I say aloud into the room that knows my weather. And some of us go even while we stay. Both truths fit. Both are manageable creatures. I make tea. I lean into the window. I touch the crane and feel, under the paper, the ordinary heartbeat of a room that has stopped auditioning for sorrow. I don't need a final grand gesture. The small ones have unionized and are doing excellent work. Still, I carry the bird to the river. Not to drown it. To give it better air. I set it on the low wall where people leave chalk messages about found dogs and lost umbrellas and love that intends to be better. I write beside it, small and honest. If you need a wing, borrow mine. Then I walk away, not because I am done with letters or because birds don't belong on sills, but because the morning has more room when my hands are empty. On the way home, the bus pauses for another cat. I grin at the sky, and the sky does not flinch. When I reach my door, I press my palm to it, a ritual that is slowly becoming a greeting instead of a plea. Inside, the light nods. The plants perform their green without complaint. The necklace over the nail spells a word I'm no longer afraid to wear. I open the drawer with the batteries and the bulbs and the letter, and I touch the paper like you touch a scar that taught you something worth keeping. I close the drawer gently. The kettle, clever with memory, clicks off at exactly the right moment. I pour. I sit. I breathe. No trumpets. No fireworks. Only the useful heroism of a life that has decided to be mine. Outside somewhere, a trumpet does try a new key. The city, patient and plural, harmonizes. I take a sip and let the sound go through me. And if the night asks later, as it sometimes does, "Are you fine?" I will say, with a mouth that has learned not to lie, "No, I am real." It is better.